I found out my parents had quite literally written me out of their lives from beyond the grave when I sat down in a paneled conference room that smelled like coffee and old paper and heard the lawyer read the sentence that said my little sister got everything they owned, on the express condition that she shall not give, devise, lend, transfer, gift, or otherwise make available any portion of this estate, directly or indirectly, to our son Nathaniel Rogers. And yes, they used my full name like. I was on trial, and then the lawyer cleared his throat and added, and in the event that our daughter violates this restriction, in the determination of our pastor, the entire estate shall instead pass to First Redeemer Baptist Church. And every set of eyes in the room slid over to me as if I had somehow caused that sentence to exist just by breathing on the wrong side of the moral line my parents drew 30 years ago. I had gone in that day with exactly zero expectation of inheriting anything, to be honest, which is maybe why it knocked the wind out of me so hard, because there's a difference between not getting something and having your parents sign a legal document that says, in essence, we would rather give our home and our savings to a building and a man in a suit than risk even $1 ending up in our son's hands. And I apparently hadn't prepared myself for that difference. On one side of the table sat Pastor Jim in his dark suit and his church smile, the kind that never reaches his eyes. A stack of papers in front of him like this was just another board meeting. On the other side sat my sister Emily, small and tight-shouldered in a black dress, twisting her wedding ring around and around, eyes already red from the actual funeral we'd had 2 days before. I sat at the far end next to my boyfriend, or partner, or whatever word my parents had pretended not to hear every time I used it, a man named Luke who had taken the day off work to support me because he knew, better than anyone, that whatever happened in that room was going to rip open some old scars. The lawyer, a gray-haired man who'd known my parents since before I was born, adjusted his glasses and kept reading, but I barely heard the rest of it at first, just a dull roar in my ears and the words, "Shall not give," repeating like a drumbeat. My mother and father's house, the one I had helped repaint after Dad's first heart attack, the one I'd spent 3 months in last year installing grab bars and widening doorways so my dad's walker could get through, was now my sister's. Free and clear. As long as I never so much as slept on the couch for free. Their savings, such as they were, their cars, my mother's wedding ring, even the ugly grandfather clock in the hall that had been in Dad's family for 3 generations, all of it to Emily, on the understanding that I would never, under any circumstances, benefit. Is that even legal? I heard myself ask, my voice scratchy. Can they really do that, just like ban me by name? The lawyer looked uncomfortable, which at least made me feel a tiny bit less insane. A testator can generally leave their assets to whomever they choose and impose conditions, within certain limits, he said carefully. Disinheriting an adult child is legal in this state. Conditions requiring illegal acts are not enforceable, but this kind of restriction, while harsh, is not uncommon when there has been a family estrangement. It's not harsh, it's vindictive, Luke muttered under his breath, loud enough that I saw Pastor Jim's jaw tighten. Nathan, Pastor Jim said smoothly, folding his hands over his Bible like he was about to launch into a sermon. Your parents were very clear with the church leadership about their wishes. This isn't about punishment. It's about stewardship. They didn't want resources that God entrusted to them being used to support a lifestyle they believed was sinful. So they wrote a booby-trap will, I said. So that if my sister ever, I don't know, lets me crash in the guest room for a week when I lose my job, you get to swoop in and take the house. His eyes flickered, just for a second, and that was all the confirmation I needed that he'd had a hand in drafting this mess. I'm sure your sister will honor their wishes, he said. She understands the importance of obedience. Emily flinched like he'd slapped her, and something in my chest twisted so hard I wanted to yell at him on her behalf and on mine. For context, I'm 40 years old. My parents died within 6 months of each other, Dad from a stroke, Mom, from the kind of slow cancer that eats a person in pieces. I'm their oldest child and only son, the one who left home at 19, moved 2 hours away to the city, and committed the unforgivable sin of not only leaving our small southern town but also leaving the church, then, later, telling them I was gay. Emily is 3 years younger and has lived her whole life like she was born to smooth over sharp edges. Growing up, she was the one who stayed home to help set up for church potlucks while I slipped out early to smoke behind the gym with the kids my mother referred to as bad influences. She married young, to a youth pastor with a nice smile and empty pockets, had 2 kids before 30, and never moved more than 15 miles away. In my parents' eyes, I was the prodigal who never came back, and she was the faithful one, the daughter who deserved everything because she never made them choose between their child and their doctrine. The thing is, the narrative is never that simple when you zoom in. When I came out at 22, it was in a shaking phone call from my shitty one-bedroom apartment. I'd been seeing a guy in secret, a bartender named Chris, and he'd been pushing me to stop living a double life. For months. My mother cried like someone had died. My father went very quiet and then said, "I don't have a son," and hung up. For about a year after that, Emily was the only one in the family who would return my calls. She'd slip messages through, little updates about Mom's blood pressure, Dad's work, the new car they bought even though they claimed to be broke. She was also the one who begged me, more than once, to apologize to. "Just tell them you're trying to change. Because they're not bad people, Nate, they just don't understand." She meant well, but what she was really asking was for me to make myself small enough to fit back into their story. I couldn't do it. So I missed some holidays. Then all of them. I sent birthday cards that came back. Returned to sender. Eventually, I stopped trying. You'd think that would be the end of the story, the clean cut. But family is messy, and life doesn't respect clean cuts. When Dad had his first stroke 3 years ago, it was Emily who called me sobbing. "He keeps asking for you," she said. "He can't move his right side. Mom's a wreck. Please, Nate. I know you and they have your issues, but I can't do this alone." I went. I took time off work, loaded my tools in my truck, and drove back to the town I swore I'd never live in again. I changed light bulbs my father couldn't reach anymore. I built a ramp over the front steps. I moved their washer and dryer from the basement to a closet off the kitchen so Mom wouldn't have to haul laundry up and downstairs. I installed grab bars in the shower and widened the bathroom door with my own 2 hands. I slept on the pull-out couch in the den for 6 weeks, waking up when I heard my father's walker scrape across the hall, catching him more than once when his legs gave out, helping him back into bed while he muttered, "You shouldn't be here," even as he clutched my arm like a lifeline. We barely talked about anything real. When he did talk, it was about the weather or the price of gas or the latest scandal at church, said with an edge that let me know he was really talking about me. Mom never apologized. She did, one night, after Emily had taken the kids home, stand in the doorway of the den watching me fold the blankets and say, "You've always been so good with your hands," in a voice that sounded almost like pride. Then she ruined it by adding, "You could have built a real life here if you hadn't chosen what you chose." After those 6 weeks, I went back to my life in the city, to my job as a carpenter and my small rented apartment, and my then boyfriend, now partner, Luke, who listened to me rant and cry and then helped me pick up the pieces. I started coming back more often after that, driving down at least once a month to give Emily a break, fixing whatever was broken around the house, taking Mom to chemotherapy when Emily's husband couldn't get off work. It was a strange limbo, being needed and resented at the same time, but it was also the most contact I'd had with my parents in 15 years, and some desperate part of me hoped, even then, that showing up might soften something in them. Apparently, it did not soften their lawyers. Back in the conference room, the reading went on. After the big condition bomb, the rest of the will was almost boring. A few small gifts to the church, the usual legal language about taxes and executors, instructions to donate Dad's battered pickup to a men's rehab center. When it was over, the lawyer asked if anyone had questions. Pastor Jim said something about, "Praise God for faithful servants," and I held up a hand like I was back in 5th grade. "Yeah," I said. "I've got one." "Why the clause? Why not just say, we leave everything to Emily? Why write in this weird punishment game?" The lawyer glanced at Pastor Jim and then back at me. "Your parents wanted to be very clear," he said. "They were concerned that you might pressure your sister, or that she might feel guilt into sharing against their wishes. They felt this was the best way to prevent conflict." I laughed, a short, ugly sound. "Prevent conflict," I said. "Right. Because nothing says peace like threatening to take away your daughter's home if she buys her brother a sandwich." Emily made a strangled noise, like she was halfway between a sob and a laugh. Pastor Jim frowned. "Nathan," he said, "your parents loved you. They prayed for you every day. This was not done in hatred. It was done in love, to encourage you to turn back to God. They believed that allowing you to suffer earthly consequences might save you from eternal ones. I'm sure starving would do wonders for my soul," I said. Luke put a hand on my knee under the table, a silent reminder not to blow up my sister's life in a room full of witnesses. So I shut up. After the meeting, when Pastor Jim had left and the lawyer had gone to make copies, Emily cornered me in the hallway by the coffee machine. Her mascara had smudged, and her hands were shaking. "I didn't know," she said before I could speak. "I swear, Nate. I knew they weren't going to leave you anything. Mom said as much when she was mad, but I had no idea they wrote that." "I believe you," I said, because I did. "Emily's a terrible liar. It's not your fault they were petty." "They weren't petty," she said reflexively, then sagged. "Okay, maybe this is petty. God. They made me promise, when Mom got really sick, that I'd stand firm, that I wouldn't enable sin. I thought they meant like, not letting you crash here with one of your boyfriends or something. I didn't know they'd put it in the will." "They did," I said. "In black and white. With our friendly neighborhood pastor as judge and executioner." "What are you going to do?" she asked. I shrugged, though my stomach was churning. "What can I do?" I said. "I don't want their money. I never did. I trailed off because the truth, I just wanted to know they hadn't died hating me, felt too raw to say out loud in a beige hallway. "I'll figure something out," I finished lamely. We left it there, for the moment. I went back to the city with Luke. He took me out for greasy diner pancakes and listened while I rehearsed comebacks I'd never get to say to my dead parents. I went back to work, measuring and cutting and sanding things, trying not to think about the fact that I couldn't even afford a decent one-bedroom in my own name, while my parents' house, the one I'd bled and sweated in to make accessible, sat 2 hours away with my sister in it, like a loaded emotional gun. A few weeks later, Emily called. "Can you come down?" she asked. "There's something you need to see." When I got there, the house felt strange without my parents in it, like it was holding its breath. The recliner where Dad used to sit was empty. The Afghan mom always kept draped over the back, folded neatly on the arm. Emily led me to their bedroom, to the small desk in the corner that had always been more symbolic than functional. On it sat a cardboard file box. "I was going through their papers for the lawyer," she said. "I found these in a folder labeled estate stuff. I think you should read them." Inside were 3 things that mattered and a lot of things that didn't. The things that mattered were a letter addressed to Emily in our mother's looping handwriting, a letter addressed to me that had never been mailed, and an older version of the will, dated 2 years earlier, before the clause. In that version, they'd split everything between us 50-50. No conditions. No church as backup beneficiary. Just a boilerplate boring. To our beloved children. Will. The newer will, the one we'd heard read, was dated 18 months later. They changed their minds, I said, flipping between the two. No, Emily said quietly. Pastor Jim changed their minds. She handed me the letter addressed to her. It was 3 pages long, full of the kind of religious language my mother loved. Burden for souls, standing in the gap, tough love. Buried halfway down the second page was the line that made my throat close. We have made a new will to ensure that your brother cannot manipulate you into sharing what God has entrusted to you, no matter what lies he tells about us. Pastor Jim has helped us word it so that if you give in to guilt, the church will receive the blessing instead. We ask you, as our daughter, to promise you will honor this even when we are gone. There it was in black and white, not just their decision, but his fingerprints all over it. He helped them word it. I read aloud. Of course he did. Emily nodded toward the second letter. You should read yours, she said. The letter to me was shorter and harsher. It started with, Dear Nathaniel, and went downhill from there. They told me they loved me but could not condone my lifestyle. They said they appreciated the help I'd given around the house, but that no amount of good deeds can wash away sin without repentance. They wrote that they were leaving everything to Emily because she has walked in obedience, and because they didn't want to put temptation in my path by giving me money I might use to further sinful choices. There was one line, though, that snagged my eye, not because it was kind but because it was oddly practical. We know you have always been able to support yourself, and you have made it clear you do not want our help. In that, at least, we can finally grant your wish. That's not what I meant, I muttered, folding the letter back up. I hadn't wanted their help because their help always came with strings. Not because I wanted them to pretend I didn't exist. I picked up the older will. Why didn't they just leave this one? I asked. It's not like your husband's rolling in cash. You could have used the help. Emily laughed without humor. You think I'm not aware? She said. We've got the mortgage, the car, the kids' braces. Ben's student loans. I asked Mom once, when Dad was in rehab, if they'd ever thought about setting something aside for the grandkids. She said, we're leaving everything to you. If you don't squander it, that will be their inheritance. I didn't know this was what she meant. Do you think they knew about this older will when they signed the new one? I asked, tapping the dates. Of course they did, she said. They brought it to Pastor Jim. He went with them to the lawyer. He told them they needed to tighten it up so there wouldn't be loopholes. Loopholes like me sleeping on your couch, I said. Exactly, she said. We sat in silence for a minute. Then Emily said very quietly, What do you want me to do? It was such an absurd question it took me a second to parse it. What do I? I don't get a say, I said. That's the point. They made sure I don't get a say. You do though, she said. Practically. If you ask, I'll help. I don't care what they wrote. You're my brother. If you ever need a place to stay, if you need money for a deposit, if your car dies, you can call me. But if I do that, if I put your name on anything or give you cash, Pastor Jim can contest the will on behalf of the church. The lawyer said so. They'd probably win. I'd lose the house. The kids would lose their home. So I need to know what you need, so I can figure out what risks to take. Hearing it put that starkly made my stomach knot. Because no matter how angry I was at my parents, no matter how tempted I was to say, Screw them, let's burn this whole thing down, I could not, in good conscience, tell my sister to risk her children's stability for my pride. I don't want your house, I said. I don't want their money. I gestured around at the room, at the furniture, and the photos on the wall. Do you have any idea how many nights I lay awake as a teenager believing them when they said God Himself was disgusted with me? And now, apparently, the only thing that disgusts them more is the idea of you helping me buy a lawnmower someday. Nate, she said softly. You know that's not, don't, I said. Don't tell me they loved me in their own way. Their own way was locking the fridge so I couldn't sneak food on fasting days and making me kneel on rice when I talked back. Their own way was telling relatives I'd died spiritually when I moved out. Their own way was this. I held up the letter. But you're not them. She swallowed. So what do we do? She asked again. What we did, at first, was nothing dramatic. I went back home. I told Luke what we'd found. I took on extra jobs and squirreled away a little more in savings, just in case, because the idea of ever being in a position where I might need to ask Emily for help made me feel physically ill. Life went on. Emily and I talked more than we had in years, texting about everything from the kids' school projects to the latest hypocritical thing Pastor Jim had said from the pulpit. Her husband, to his credit, stayed mostly out of it, other than to say, "We're on your side," once in my kitchen when they came up for a weekend. Then, about a year after the funeral, my landlord sold our building. The new owner decided to upgrade the units and triple the rent. We had 60 days to get out or sign a lease we couldn't remotely afford. The rental market in our city had gone to hell. Every place we looked at either wanted more than we made in a month or wouldn't allow pets, and I was not about to give up the arthritic mutt I'd adopted when my parents told me they didn't want me at Christmas because I'd confused the children. Luke's credit was shot from some stupid medical bills in his 20s. Mine was decent, but our combined income was not impressing anyone. One night, staring at yet another application denied email, I said, if my parents hadn't done what they did, if they just left us each half, I could put a down payment on something. We could have a chance. But they'd rather our sister's pastor get rich than us live somewhere without roaches. You could ask Emily to co-sign, Luke said quietly. She'd probably do it. She can't, I said. Remember the clause? If she legally obligates herself to help me with housing, that's probably enough for Pastor Jim to cry foul. I'd asked the lawyer that exact question once. He'd said, it would give them grounds to argue you're receiving a benefit from the estate. It wouldn't be a slam dunk, but it'd be risky. I wasn't willing to put my sister's roof on the line for my lease. Then Emily called. Mom's IRA finally paid out, she said. The lawyer transferred it into my name. It's not a lot, but it's enough that if I refinance the house, I could take out a home equity line and, well, I could hire you for some work. I said, heart pounding. If you pay me wages out of the house, that's the same thing as giving me money from the estate. Not if you actually do work, she said. I need a new roof. The kitchen's a disaster. You could remodel the bathroom. We sign a contract, we document everything. If Pastor Jim asks, I point to the invoices. I'm paying a licensed contractor fair market value. The fact that he's my brother is incidental. He's not an idiot, I said. He'll know what we're doing. Let him know, she said. He doesn't get to dictate who I hire to fix my toilet. It was a loophole. Not a perfect one, but a foothold. We talked to a different lawyer, one who had no affiliation with the church. She said, your parents can't prohibit you from engaging in ordinary business transactions. A court would be reluctant to punish you for hiring a qualified contractor. As long as you can show fair value, it's unlikely the church would win a challenge. So we did it. I drew up plans. I pulled permits. I gutted my parents' avocado green kitchen, the one my mother had always sworn she'd update when we can afford it. and built Emily a new one with sturdy cabinets and countertops that would last. I ripped out the pink tile in the hall bathroom and replaced it with something neutral and safe. I installed better insulation and a new roof. I invoiced her for every hour, every board, every roll of shingles. She paid me out of the home equity line, and I used that money, plus what I'd saved, to put a down payment on the cheapest little fixer-upper I could find in the crummier part of my city. It wasn't much, 2 bedrooms, 1 bath, a yard barely big enough for the dog to pee in. But it was ours, with our names on the deed. No clauses. No pastors. No conditions. Pastor Jim, predictably, lost his mind when he found out. He called Emily into his office and told her she was walking a dangerous line. He hinted that the church elders were concerned about her compromising with sin. He sent her emails with subject lines like, "A sister's responsibility," and "Do not be unequally yoked." When she pushed back and said, "I hired my brother. He did the work. That's all," he said. "Your parents entrusted this estate to you as a steward. If you allow their resources to benefit Nathaniel, you are rebelling not just against them but against God." "You mean," she said, "rebelling against you." She told me later that the look on his face made her realize something she'd been slowly waking up to since the funeral, that the battle lines he drew had less to do with theology and more to do with control. He threatened, at one point, to ask the church to petition the court to review the will. I said, "Let him. There's nothing for them to get. The IRA's gone to you. The house is yours subject to the mortgage. The little bit of savings went to medical bills. He'd just be wasting the congregation's money on legal fees." And watched the realization dawn on her that this man was willing to squander tithes on punishing her for having a relationship with her brother. She left the church 6 months later. Quietly at first, then officially, when he tried to use the pulpit to shame her for drifting. Half our extended family stopped talking to her. The other half whispered about what happened to sweet Emily. My parents would have called it a tragedy. I call it a miracle that took way too long. A few years down the line, here's where things stand. I live in a drafty little bungalow with Luke and the dog and a collection of mismatched furniture that we've refinished together. My hands are still calloused from work, but they're my calluses, earned on jobs I chose and on renovations we planned, not on emergency ramps for parents who saw my labor as obligation and my love as leverage. Emily still lives in our parents' house. It's warmer now, more hers, fewer doilies and more kids' artwork on the walls. We visit sometimes. I sleep in what used to be my bedroom when we stay the night, and there's a tiny, childish part of me that still expects Mom to appear in the doorway and tell me to show some respect, because Luke is there too. She never does, of course. She's gone. But the ghosts of their expectations hang in the air like the smell of her old perfume. We haven't touched the older will. The lawyer says that even if we tried to argue that it should stand instead of the hate clause one, the court would probably go with the most recent properly executed version. My parents did what they did in full possession of their faculties and plenty of time to reconsider. They chose. We're living with the consequences. Every once in a while, when money is tight and something expensive breaks, the truck's transmission, the water heater, a wave of anger hits me out of nowhere. Not because I want their house, but because of the sheer smallness of it all. They had a choice between trusting their grown children to work it out or preemptively poisoning our relationship to make a point, and they chose poison. They could have written, "We love both our children. We disagree with some of Nathaniel's choices, but we trust Emily to manage the estate wisely." Instead they wrote, "If you ever help him, we'll make sure you pay." And yet, in the end, despite their best efforts, Emily and I helped each other anyway. She hired me when I needed work. I gave her below market rates when she needed renovations. We swapped babysitting for home repairs, home-cooked meals for moving heavy furniture. We found ways to be siblings that didn't involve lawyers or pastors or dead people's opinions. I still wrestle with guilt sometimes. When I lie awake at 3 in the morning, my father's voice in my head saying things like, "You're spitting on our grave." I wonder if I did the right thing by letting Emily take the risk she did, by encouraging her, implicitly or explicitly, to defy the spirit of that clause even if we technically obeyed the letter. There's a part of me that was raised to believe that parents' wishes are sacred, that the worst thing you can be is ungrateful. That part whispers that I should have just walked away entirely. Let the church have the house. Let Emily keep whatever the law said she could keep. Build my life from scratch without ever touching anything that came within a mile of their estate. Another part of me looks at my calloused hands and my little house and my sister's kids doing homework at the kitchen table I installed and thinks, no. They already took enough from me. They took my childhood certainty that I was lovable. They took my sense of safety in my own skin. They took years of potential peace by making my existence a problem to solve instead of a person to love. They don't also get to dictate whether my sister can hire me or buy my kids a Christmas present someday. So that's my story, internet strangers. I'm the son whose parents wrote a will that said his sister could have everything as long as she swore never to give him a cent. The son whose name was used in a legal document more like a curse than a blessing. The brother who had to sit across from a pastor while that curse was read out loud and decide, on the fly, whether to burn it all down or try to find a way to live around it. We found our loopholes. We paid our prices. My parents' precious church didn't get the house, and my sister didn't lose it, but a lot of illusions died along the way. Some people in our extended family think I manipulated Emily into betraying our parents' wishes. Others think I was too soft and should have contested the will outright. I'm somewhere in the middle, just trying to be a decent brother and a decent man with a history that makes both those things more complicated than they should be. If you were in my shoes, if your parents left everything to your sibling on the explicit condition that they never help you in any way and threatened to divert the whole estate to a church if they did, and then that sibling looked you in the eye and said, "I want to help, but we could lose everything," would you do what I did and find ways to quietly work around the clause, letting them take some risks so you both could build something fairer, even if it means spitting on your parents' last wishes? Or would you step back completely, refuse any benefit that could be traced back to the estate, and let your parents' control from beyond the grave dictate your life so you could at least say you honored their will, no matter how cruel it was?